I never thought I'd be one of those guys who gets hit with some mess like this. My marriage to Lisa had always seemed solid enough, nothing perfect, but we had what I thought was a good thing going. We met in college, had been together for nearly 10 years now, and I genuinely believed she was the one. She was fiery, stubborn, and kinda bitchy sometimes, but I figured that was just her personality. Still, she was beautiful and fierce, so I overlooked the attitude most of the time. Things started to feel off about 6 months ago. Little things, she'd get weirdly secretive about her phone, leave it face down all the time, and suddenly she was working late more often than usual. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe new clients, new projects, whatever. But then I noticed her acting strangely around my coach, Mark. He's been coaching me for my boxing career, something I was really proud of, especially since I was about to get my shot at the title. Mark's a good guy, a former amateur champ himself, and I'd always trusted him. But Lisa, she started acting weird whenever Mark was around. She'd make snide comments about how overbearing he was, or how she didn't like how he was always hovering around me. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just jealous or feeling insecure. But then she started going out more often, claiming it was just girls' nights or some work thing. I'd ask her if she was seeing someone else and she'd laugh it off, calling me paranoid. "You're just insecure like always," she'd say. The biggest red flag, though, was when I noticed her phone kept vibrating at odd hours. I didn't check her messages, but the pattern was clear. Then she started coming home later and later, smelling different, like perfume I didn't recognize or maybe a different scent altogether. I was starting to feel an annoying little voice in my gut, but I kept telling myself I was overreacting. I trusted her. That's what I wanted to believe. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then it all blew up. I was at the gym one night, finishing up a workout, and I decided to check the security footage from the training room. I'd installed a hidden camera there just for fun to see how Mark was coaching me, but I never really expected to find anything worth digging into. I hit play, and there it was. The footage was from the night before my title fight. I saw Lisa sneaking into the training room after hours early in the morning with Mark. They were in there for a long time, acting like they were working out, but I could see their outlines in the dim light and my stomach sank. What followed was worse. They weren't just talking about boxing or training techniques. They were doing things. Things that shouldn't happen between a coach and his fighter's wife. I saw her slip her hand into his shorts, heard them laugh in that husky, secretive way people do when they're hiding something. My blood ran cold. She was cheating on me with my coach, and this was the night before my biggest fight. It was sabotage. I knew it then. She'd planned this. She was going to ruin me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The world spun for a second and I couldn't breathe. My mind raced. What the hell was I supposed to do? How could she do this? All those nights I was training, working my ass off, thinking she was supporting me, and she was sneaking around with Mark in the training room after hours. That was the moment I realized I'd been naive. I'd trusted her, and she'd betrayed me in the worst way possible. I kept replaying the footage, trying to understand how she'd been able to lie so convincingly. I couldn't believe I'd almost missed the signs, that I'd been blind to what was really happening under my nose. I came home that night furious, confused, and heartbroken all at once. I had no idea how I was going to confront her. I just knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I had to face it head on, even if it shattered everything I thought I knew about my marriage. That's when I decided I'd gather my courage and talk to her. But I also knew something had to change. I was done being played, done being the fool. The next day, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at my phone, debating whether I should confront her right then or wait until I had all my thoughts straight. But the footage replayed in my mind constantly. Every time I saw her laugh with Mark, her hand on his thigh, I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak. How could she do this to me, to us? I'd always thought she was a bit of a bitch, but this was something else entirely. Finally, I decided I couldn't keep quiet. I texted her to come home early from whatever girls' night she claimed she was on. When she walked in the door, her face lit up with that bitchy smirk she always wore when she thought she was in control. I could see the irritation flicker in her eyes when she saw the serious look on my face. "Hey babe, what's up?" she asked, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, trying to look casual. I took a deep breath. I saw the footage, Lisa, I said bluntly. Her face immediately changed, her eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? She snapped. I didn't bother playing games. I pulled out my phone and showed her the video. Her face froze, the color draining from her cheeks. She blinked rapidly, then tried to brush it off, her voice flipping into a sassy, dismissive tone. Oh, come on. That's not what it looks like. You're imagining things, you're overthinking again. She brushed past me, heading to the kitchen, acting like she hadn't just been caught with her pants down, literally. But I wasn't falling for her typical lies. I knew what I saw, and I wasn't about to let her deny it. Stop lying, I said, voice low and angry. I saw you sneaking into the training room with Mark, the night before my fight, and I saw what you two were doing. Don't tell me it was just training. She spun around, her eyes blazing. You're nuts. You're always paranoid. Maybe I wanted to talk to him about your stupid boxing. Maybe I was just checking on him. You're blowing this out of proportion. She tried to sound confident, but I could see the flicker of guilt behind her eyes. She was lying, and she knew it. I told her, I want the truth now. No more bullshit. Are you cheating on me with Mark? Because if you are, I swear to God I'll make your life hell. Her face twisted into a sneer, and she looked at me like I was the crazy one. Oh, please, you're just jealous. You think I'd cheat on you. You're not even that good in bed, honestly. You're so clueless, it's pathetic. Maybe Mark was just helping me out with some stuff like he always does. That was her go-to, blame me, make me doubt myself, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew she was lying. She was a bitch, and she'd been lying to my face for months. I felt the boiling rage inside me, and I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just walk away from this without a plan. But what? How do you fight someone who's so good at lying? How do you prove what you already saw? My mind raced, trying to think of what I could do next. I needed leverage, something I could hold over her to make her admit the truth. I decided to keep quiet for now, gather more evidence if I could, and wait for her to slip up again. Some part of me wanted to lash out, to scream and break everything. But I knew that wouldn't help. I had to stay calm, be strategic. She was manipulative, that much I knew. If I lost my temper, she'd spin everything around, make me look like the bad guy. So I stayed quiet, listening to her make more excuses, more lies, all the while feeling my confidence slipping away bit by bit. I didn't want to believe she'd do this, but I saw the truth, clear as day. And now I had to decide what to do with it. Over the next few days, everything felt like a nightmare. I kept replaying that footage in my head, trying to understand how I could have missed all the signs for so long. Lisa was still acting like she was innocent, throwing her bitchy attitude around, calling me paranoid because I kept asking where she'd been or who she'd been talking to. She insisted she was done with Mark, but her words sounded hollow, like she was just trying to shut me up. I knew she was lying. I could see the guilt in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. I started to notice little things, too. Her phone kept vibrating, she was withdrawing even more, and I caught her in tiny lies about where she'd gone or who she was texting. But I didn't say anything. I was gathering my strength, watching her every move, waiting for the perfect moment to confront her again or to get more concrete proof. I couldn't trust her anymore, and I knew I had to be careful. One night I decided I needed to see her phone again. I knew she'd hide anything I might find, but I had no choice. I waited until she went to bed, then slipped out of the room, quietly unlocked her phone and started scrolling. That's when I found the texts. So many of them flirty, explicit, full of lies. She was still talking to Mark, even after she'd told me she was done. There were messages filled with promises and fake affection, almost like she was trying to convince herself she wasn't cheating. But the worst part, she'd been planning how to cover her tracks. She had deleted some messages, but she missed a few. I saw the screen where she told him she'd see him tonight, and how she didn't want me to find out because I'd be so mad. That's when I realized I couldn't just confront her again. I needed to dig deeper. I set up a second camera in the bedroom, pointed at her side of the bed. I wanted to catch her in the act if she slipped up again, but I also knew I'd have to be smart about how I handled this. I wasn't going to accuse her blindly. I needed undeniable proof. In the meantime, I started to feel a mix of emotions I couldn't quite control. Anger, heartbreak, betrayal, all swirling together. I'd always believed in honesty, in loyalty. And now I was lying here wondering if my entire marriage was a lie. I thought about how she always threw her bitchy attitude when she didn't get her way, how she lied so effortlessly, how she manipulated every situation. It made me feel sick. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was turning into someone I didn't recognize. One night I decided to confront her again, knowing I had enough evidence to back me up. I was nervous, but also furious. I told her I knew about the messages, about her sneaking around, about everything. Her response was classic: denial, denial, denial. She yelled, called me crazy, said I was imagining things. She even accused me of being jealous of Mark. Goddamn, that line almost made me laugh. She was so quick to shift the blame, to make me feel like I was the one losing it. But I wasn't going to fall for her bullshit anymore. I told her I was done playing her games. I told her I'd be watching her every move from now on, and if I caught her lying again, she'd regret it. That night, I stayed awake, watching her through the new camera I installed, waiting to catch her in the act again. She kept acting innocent, but I could see the cracks in her mask. Her eyes darted around, her behavior was jittery, and I knew I was just a step away from catching her red-handed. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but I knew I couldn't stay with her after all this. She'd betrayed me in the worst way possible, and honestly, I didn't know if I'd ever be able to forgive her. All I could do was prepare for what came next. The days that followed felt like walking on a razor's edge. I was constantly on high alert, watching her every move, every word, every glance. I was trying to stay calm, trying to keep my head clear, while inside I was boiling with rage and heartbreak. I couldn't believe that the woman I loved, the woman I married, had been sneaking around behind my back with Mark, my own coach. The fact that it was the night before my biggest fight made it even worse. I kept replaying that footage, imagining how much she'd sabotaged me. One night I decided to push further. I set up a small recorder in the bedroom, just to catch her talking to Mark again if she slipped up. I knew she'd be careful, but I hoped I could catch her in a moment of weakness, say, when she thought I wasn't listening. It was a gamble, but I felt I had nothing to lose. That night I lay on the couch, pretending to be asleep, while I kept the recorder discreetly in my hand. What I heard was chilling. She was talking to Mark in a hushed voice, trying to plan their next meetup, promising to keep it secret, and she even said something about needing to cover her tracks. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was actively trying to hide this from me. She was lying to my face. Her bitchy tone was still there, full of attitude, but it was layered with guilt, maybe even desperation. I listened for hours, hearing her try to justify herself, saying she'd never meant for it to go this far, but she couldn't resist Mark's charm. That was the moment I realized I had enough proof to confront her in a way she couldn't deny. I decided I'd catch her red-handed, not just with texts or footage, but with her own words admitting everything. I knew she'd be careful, but I also knew her. She couldn't keep lying forever. I just had to be patient. The next morning I confronted her again, this time with the recordings in hand. Her face turned pale when I played back her own voice, describing her plans, her lies. She stammered, trying to spin it. "It's not what it looks like," she said, voice trembling with irritation. "You're just overreacting. Mark's been helping me with your training. You're so insecure, it's pathetic." She threw her usual line about how I was so clueless in bed, how wasn't enough, how I was just a jealous fool, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her, "I've had enough of your lies. I saw you sneaking into the training room, I saw the texts, I heard your voice. I know you cheated on me with Mark, and I know you sabotaged my fight. I can't stay with someone who lies and manipulates like this." Her eyes flashed with anger, then with contempt. "You can't prove anything," she snapped. "You're just making this all up because you're insecure and hurt that I don't want your sorry ass anymore." That's when I snapped. I told her she'd crossed a line I'd never forgive. I said I was done. I told her to pack her shit and get out. The rage I felt was like nothing I'd ever known. It was pure, raw, and undeniable. I was hurt, yes, but more than anything, I was furious. Furious that she would betray me like this, that she'd cheat on me with someone I trusted, that she'd sabotage my career at the worst possible moment. I threw her out that day. She screamed and yelled, calling me every name in The book, but I didn't care. I knew I'd be better off without her. I realized how much I'd wasted on her, how much I'd given her trust, and how she'd just thrown it back in my face. The house felt empty, cold. I was devastated but also oddly relieved. I had uncovered the truth and I finally had my answer. That night I sat alone in the quiet. I felt broken but also free. I realized that sometimes the worst betrayals teach you the most about yourself. I'd learned to trust my instincts from now on. I'd learned that love isn't enough if someone is willing to lie and cheat so easily. And I knew that the fight, my big chance, was still ahead of me. I just had to get through this heartbreak first. But I promised myself I wouldn't let her destroy everything I'd worked for. Not anymore. After she left, I was left with a hollow silence that felt almost worse than the betrayal itself. I sat there for hours replaying everything, her lies, her sneers, the footage, the recordings. It was like my whole world had been turned upside down overnight. I'd been so blind, so trusting. But now there was no denying it. She had been sneaking around behind my back, doing everything she could to ruin me, to keep her affair with Mark hidden until she thought she could get away with it. The fight was just days away, and I was supposed to be confident, focused, ready. Instead, I felt like a shell of myself. My mind kept drifting back to her, to that training room, to the way she'd betrayed me in the worst way. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I thought was real was just a lie. Our marriage, her love, her loyalty. It was all a facade. I was angry at her for cheating, but I was also angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, for trusting her so blindly. Despite all that, I knew I couldn't let this ruin me. I'd worked too hard for this championship, trained too long, sacrificed too much. I decided that I'd still fight, because that was the only way I could reclaim some part of myself. If I let her betrayal define me, I'd lose everything. So I pushed through the pain, the heartbreak, the rage, and I mentally prepared for the fight of my life. I knew I'd have to channel all that anger into the ring. I didn't want her sabotage to beat me, not without a fight. The days leading up to the match were brutal. I couldn't sleep, kept thinking about what she'd done and how I was going to face Mark after everything. I started to see him in a different light, less as a coach, more as the snake he was. The thought of him, of her, made my stomach churn. But I also realized I couldn't let them win, not after what they did. I had to stay focused, sharpen my skills, and pretend everything was normal. Inside, I was crumbling, but I couldn't show it. On the night before the fight, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at the mirror. I saw the scars on my face, the dark circles under my eyes, and I knew that this fight was more than just about the belt. It was about proving to myself that I was still a fighter, that I could rise above betrayal and heartbreak. I clenched my fists and made a silent vow. No matter what happened in that ring, I was going to give it everything I had. I was going to show everyone, especially her, that I wasn't done yet, that I still had fight left in me. I knew that after the fight, whatever the result, my life would never be the same. The trust I once had was gone, shattered into pieces. But I also knew I'd grow stronger from this, even if it hurt like hell. I had to move on. I had to find a way to forgive myself for trusting her so much, to forgive her for her lies, and to rebuild whatever was left of me. Because at the end of the day, the only person who could truly fix this was me, and I was determined to do it, even if it meant fighting my own heartbreak in the process. The fight itself was brutal. I went in with a blazing fury, not just because I wanted that belt, but because every punch I threw was also a punch against the betrayal that had almost broken me. The crowd was roaring, but my focus was narrow, zeroed in on the opponent in front of me. Inside, I was a mess, angry, hurt, betrayed, but I channeled it all into that ring. For those few minutes, I was just a fighter, fighting for something more than a title. I was fighting to reclaim my dignity. I don't remember exactly how the fight ended, but I do remember the moment I finally hit my opponent with a knockout punch. The crowd erupted, and I felt an overwhelming rush of relief and victory. But even as I celebrated that win, I knew something had shifted inside me. I'd proved I could stand tall even after losing everything I thought mattered, but I also realized that the damage was done. Trust was shattered, and it was never going to be the same. In the days that followed, I started to pick up the pieces. The victory was sweet, but it didn't erase the betrayal. I knew I'd have to rebuild not just my career, but my sense of self. I cut ties with Lisa completely, blocked her number, changed my routines, and distanced myself from anything that reminded me of her. I knew I'd never forget what she'd done, but I also knew I had to move forward for my own sake. I took time to reflect on everything. I learned that love and trust are fragile, and that sometimes people betray you when you least expect it. But I also learned that I was stronger than I'd thought, that I could survive heartbreak, sabotage, and lies, and come out on top. I realized I shouldn't have trusted her blindly, but that it was my own fault for ignoring the signs. Moving forward, I promised myself I'd be more cautious, more guarded, but also more aware of who I was and what I deserved. Now, looking back, I see that the betrayal was a harsh lesson, but one I needed. It taught me that sometimes the people closest to you can turn out to be your biggest enemies, and that no amount of love can protect you from that if you're not paying attention. It also made me appreciate my own strength. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. I'm still standing, still fighting, and I'm finally ready to rebuild myself piece by piece. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone going through something similar, it's this: trust is earned, not blindly given. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Because the pain of betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you how strong you truly are. And that, in the end, is what matters most.